And welcome back to Icons of the Dragon Ball community. And joining me on this edition, a man who some of you know who he is, some of you don't know who he is, but those of you who don't know will now know, and I encourage you to check out his work. He is the co-host and producer of the Next Dimension Dragon Ball Z Podcast, as well as the comic book movie review, and he's got his fingers in all kinds of different pies. Please welcome Mr. Donovan Morgan Grant.
How are you doing, Danny? How are you doing today?
I'm all right, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. I am tickled pink. Well, I can't turn pink, but I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm very pleased to get this discussion going. So thank you very much for having me.
Yes, thank you for being here in such short notice. And very excited to talk about the icons of the community, and you are one of them. So the thing about me is that I'm very, very picky. And you and I were talking about this before we went on the air here about what kind of Dragon Ball content we, consume. For a long time, much like yourself, I only kind of heard KANZENSHUU and would read the board once in a while, and then I would watch a bridge, and that would kind of be it. And then, like in 2013, I got this job where I was working an IT position overnight, and there was a lot of dead space, like a lot of time in between work. So I went on and just Googled like Dragon Ball Z Podcast because I wanted just to hear about just Dragon Ball, just somebody else. And I'm very skeptical because, the thing about me is that I've been a fan of the series since pre-Toonami. Like I'm one of the Mike. I'm like a Mike LeBrie guy, man. I was tape trading in the 90s, watching in Japanese only 9% of the time. So I go and I find this Next Dimension podcast, which is your show. And I'm like, okay, well, let me check it out. And I went into it very, very skeptical, very, very skeptical. But I started listening to it, and what won me over was like not just your personalities, you and Jesse's personalities, but also you could sense that there was a genuine love for the show, and you could also sense too that, and this is one thing I greatly respect about you, which I wish that a lot of other people who did content, whether it be Dragon Ball, comics, movies, whatever, did, is that you're a very, very well-researched guy. And those of you listening to this, if you have not checked out the Next Dimension Dragon Ball podcast, look for it. DBZ Next Dimension.libsyn.com.
That's right.
DBZ Next Dimension.libsyn.com. There are 44 episodes as of right now. Start at the beginning and just marathon them. And what Donovan and Jesse did is, and I'm going to kind of ask you about kind of the behind the scenes of this, is that your idea was to take somebody like yourself who had already seen the show, familiar with the manga, and then take Jesse, who had only seen very, very little. And the whole, I guess, idea was the perspective of a new fan versus an experienced fan. Is that kind of what it was?
Yeah, exactly. It's a gimmick that's not entirely original. I'll be free up to say, because at the time, I mentioned this before, I've been in podcasts. I've done like a half a dozen Spider-Man podcasts, but I was listening to a Doctor Who podcast, and they use that Bigger on the Inside, and they use that gimmick of like somebody who's coming into it fresh, talking with somebody who's loved it for years. And I thought, I know if there's one thing I know besides comics, it's definitely DBZ. I could talk about it forever. But that would be boring if it was just me. So I'd like to talk about somebody who's less experienced. And because Dragon Ball Z is very much its own thing, it would be very interesting to hear a different side and get a conversation going. So I very quickly thought of a few people that could be suitable for the part, but Jesse was the first person I went to, because I feel that like he would provide a good counterbalance in terms of like, vocal intonation and voices. And he had a podcast. He was co-hosting a Godzilla podcast at the time. It may have ended actually at the time, but we were acquaintances. We ran in the same circles. We had the same conversations with the same people, but like we really got to know each other through the podcast. And for me, one of the most interesting things about the Next Dimension is seeing his love of Dragon Ball Z develop and grow.
Yes.
From stem to stern, and to see him really point out things that I didn't take a second look at, like his personal love of Bobbity is something that I really appreciate, because I found entertainment in a character that I just wanted to poke in the eye all my fandom. And
right.
We experienced him experiencing Battle of Gods as a relatively new fan versus myself as an experienced fan. I think it's just been a very successful experiment, and I'm really happy to have done the show with him above all the other potential co-hosts.
Well, he's fantastic because he comes off really likable. And the thing about your formula that worked, I think, in your case is because when you listen to Jesse and when you listen to you guys, it really comes off like like you said, you're seeing a guy, you get introduced to all these new things, get surprised by the turns and twists of the show, and it is like almost like we're reliving our childhood in a sense that we're kind of falling in love with the show again, like he's doing now. So it works. I mean, it's great. But the other thing that I like about your podcast is that you're very well researched, and you also, one of the things that impressed the hell out of me, and it might not mean much to you, but for a long time, man, I was a very, very staunch elitist purist. I don't feel that way anymore, but I was for a long time. So it takes a lot to make me kind of open my eyes at this. Is that you? And I'm sure this was your idea because it seems like you were kind of the mind behind it. Even though I'm not trying to discredit Jesse, but this was kind of your baby. Is that you would cover every aspect of the series. So when you review Dragon Ball Z, you started with Z, you didn't start with Dragon Ball, and that makes sense because Z is the more popular brand in North America. Mm-hmm. That's fine. But you would cover Kai, you'd cover Z, you'd talk about the sub, you'd talk about the dub, the Japanese version, you'd pretty much cover all the bases, which I think a lot of other people who do YouTube or who do podcasts just ignore, and you can't do that. I've said this for so long since I've started doing this YouTube thing. If you want to get a real grasp on Dragon Ball, you have to explore everything.
Yeah, I very much appreciate that. I feel that like I kind of approached it as, you just kind of want to be honest. I'll get into my my origin story of DBZ in a bit, I suppose, but I was aware of all the facets. I didn't sit down and watch Dragon Ball Z Kai until we did the podcast, but I was aware of it. I had seen some of it on YouTube, and I got the gist of what they were doing. But back in the day, when new episodes ran out on Toonami, I would see some of the Japanese version. I would notice the difference between different dubs, and I read the manga. I read the manga very early on, and when you read the translated Viz manga versus seeing the Ocean dub on Cartoon Network, you see how the voices can be different, how the tone is different, and you get a better concept of what the story is going for. And I thought, to really give Jesse and the listeners who've not been experienced with DBZ a larger grasp of what we're talking about, I thought it'd be fun to hear them say, well, in the English version they said this, in the Japanese version Master Roshi did that, and basically try to paint for them. I just thought it would be kind of interesting. Is that a very singular idea ends up being biased, and I feel that we all have our preferential takes on DBZ, but to deny all of the versions, I think, is dishonest and not really. It kind of doesn't really lend itself to very interesting discussion. But I'm glad you feel that way. I don't necessarily think that It's not so much I try to research it. I mean, I do try to research it, but I feel that there's always room for me to grow. So I'm appreciative that what little strides I actually made had some sort of effect on you. So thank you very much for that.
I mean, dude, you take time, and there's so much lazy people out there. You don't do that. You take your time. I was going to ask you too about what you just said. The whole thing is with starting Jesse out with Z, I'm just curious about this. Do you feel like if he started with Dragon Ball and you guys started there, that the podcast would have been as popular? But also, do you think that, in your opinion, that had you started with Dragon Ball, that he would have a different perspective? Because in my experience, people who start with Dragon Ball before Z view the series in a different light most of the time.
I absolutely agree with that. I think just a couple of things. For one thing, I started watching Dragon Ball Z before I watched all of Dragon Ball.
Yeah, a lot of us did.
A lot of us did, yeah, and we were fine. There, because we were interested, we could watch a series without feeling too confused. So I figured that it was definitely a hurdle. I mean, I've said before that the first episode was my personal biggest test in having this make sense to him, because he's watching all these big revelations to Goku without any frame of reference, and then Goku dies at the end of episode 4, and it's just can he maintain any interest without knowing generally what the hell is going on? But also, I mean, I very much like Dragon Ball. I own the entire Dragon Ball Z series in the manga format. I really do like it, but I feel that I think Dragon Ball is something that you have a special appreciation for, having seen Z. And in my personal opinion, if you start out with that, it's a much slower burn. It starts as it's a very different series. It's comedic. It's, the gags are a lot more juvenile, and it's not bad. I think it's really good, but I think that it takes a certain audience to start that off from scratch. And
Yes.
I felt that Dragon Ball Z would be just a bit more immediately interesting. And if he had questions or was interested in Dragon Ball, I would fill those in. But I just thought that for the purposes of what we're going to do, with zero disrespect to Dragon Ball, of course, Dragon Ball Z was probably the better way to go. I think.
No, and the thing about you is you're a very intelligent man. The reason why that's a big
Thank
deal
you.
to me, the reason why it's a big deal to me is because I hate to say it, but a lot of this community, the Dragon Ball community, is one of the most misinformed communities that I've ever even right. But the thing about for example, some of the things that you said on the show, and I remember this, you said things on the show that have kind of stuck with me. For example, you said, I remember once that one of the reasons, kind of going what you're talking about here, that you didn't start with Dragon Ball, I remember you said something to the effect of, because it's very Japanese, and that's on point like hell, bro. To understand that kind of humor, you really have to, and Jesse, I think, would get it, because he watches Godzilla, so I think he would get it. But a lot of people have trouble grasping that Toriyama humor, because it's like a different kind of humor than what we're used to here,
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, Toriyama, like that. He's a creator that I've obviously learned a lot more throughout my life. But even back then, when you get in Dragon Ball, when you're first seeing Dragon Ball after seeing Dragon Ball Z, I wouldn't say a culture shock, but it is a seat change. It is so different. I remember an early story I read was when Krillin and Goku were training with Master Roshi, and there's an entire chapter of them running around and delivering milk and all that kind of stuff, and you kind of expect this big grand master story between them training and having these hard battles, but it was a lot more goofy, and they end up being martial arts masters kind of through silly things, but that's just the nature of the storytelling. And I think once you're kind of used to the style of humor that you do see with Dragon Ball Z, you get into that a bit easier.
Yeah.
Going back to what you said earlier, in terms of misinformation, that is always something that I was familiar with and kind of, I don't want to say was indoctrinated in, but that was always in the water. Like nowadays in the information age, there can't be somebody who's legitimately interested in Dragon Ball and not find out what happens. Whereas back when I was a fan, when I was a kid, I took for read a lot of things that just did not end up happening. I'm not even listed the dozens and dozens of things I was told,
oh, me too. Hey, did you know King Cold fought Goku in SSJ3 and knocked him out of SSJ3? What scene was that?
Exactly. Or my favorite was Goku and Vegeta do the Eagle Bomb and defeat Frieza, or Goku goes Saiyan 8 or whatever, and it's just this never happened.
My favorite one ever was Vegeta goes for the Big Bang attack on Namek and then turns into sand and sacrificing his life.
That's a new one to me. But then again, there would be things that I would see in vague Japanese clips that did look really interesting. I remember seeing a clip of Fat Boo knocking out Gohan when he's trying to save Kaioshin, and he kind of just hit to the ground in one hit, and there was a 10-20 second clip, but that little information and that kind of contextless scene really looked awesome. So I was kind of down to believe anything, because why would anybody lie to me?
Dude, and that's the other thing I want to talk about too real quick is and just for everybody, just before we move on to that topic right there, I just want to say I one of the reasons I have you on is because I have asked some people about your show, and it's almost as if the DBZ Next Dimension.libsyn.com is the website. It's almost as if your podcast, you know how Toriyama describes the demon realm, how it's a coin underneath the regular realm?
Yeah.
There's a whole different fan base. I think that there's people who listen to your podcast, and then there's people who have never heard of your podcast, and there's people who have never heard of me, but they know about you. And it's almost, I did want to bring you on to kind of bridge the gap. So I want to tell everybody that, I'm endorsing it, all right? Because I do pride myself on being very credible. I am endorsing it. If you have a long commute, if you are at work for long hours like me, doing nothing, download the episodes. They're very long in a good way. They don't bore you. You've got the Toonami bumpers in there, so you got the nostalgia thing going. You've got clips from all the different versions. It's just fantastic stuff. So you were one of those guys, before we get into your origin of Dragon Ball, you were one of those guys that would I'm going to predict it as best I can. You would go to the library and you download pictures and animated GIFs of all this stuff that you had no idea what was going on. Because that's how I was.
That is exactly right. That is exactly right. You got me to a T. Like, oh yeah, especially God. I feel that like it was between. It must have been like, in the big boom of like 1999, 2000. But my brother and I would just go and just like it was like just Boo Saga after Boo Saga after Boo Saga image, and like I still remember just seeing Goten and Trunks was like mind shattering to me because they were so not even kind of close to like what I was familiar with, and I knew who they were because I read about them, but like it was just insane. Insane. And that was my favorite thing to do was just print off pictures and look at the different styles, and you would have like the production pictures and the official pictures and then Toriyama drawn colored manga.
What about the fake power levels?
That was. Yeah, I printed those off. They would have power levels like all the way down, and like, oh yeah, in the Soul games, obviously these power. Like,
oh yeah,
it was the power levels and the what if stories. I really loved. I thought those were a lot of fun.
It's just that era of like these kids nowadays are not gonna they don't get it, man. These kids they can hit Netflix or not Netflix, but they can go to like Funimation.com or they can go to Hulu and watch marathon the entire series. Back then we had nothing. All we had was tapes. We had pictures. We had some websites that would do summaries like Curtis Hoffman, some of these guys. But dude, I was the same. I had floppy disks filled with GIFs and pictures of like Frieza's other forms that hadn't been dubbed yet, and it's just like. And like you said it on one of the shows. You said the Boo Saga was this mythical thing where there's fusions in this pink guy, and then you finally see it. And I loved how when you guys reviewed the Boo Saga, you really did point out that one of the things you were spot on is when you said that I'm telling you, I listened to your show. I remember this. Toriyama did not know how to end that motherfucker. That is so. And then you brought up how he was doing Chrono Trigger and Dragon Quest VI and all that, and I'm like, yeah, he was having trouble ending that. So the end of the Boo Saga is kind of like a mess, really.
Yeah, the last like year of the Next Dimension is just going Boo Saga, talking about the Boo Saga month to month, and you can hear me get angrier and angrier as we go by it.
Man.
And but the thing is, but I think it's virtually it's incontrovertible that the idea that he was burning himself out, that he was losing interest. I read Go Aquaman about the time that we were just finishing the Boo arc. Just I found it, and that was written and illustrated around the time of the Boo arc, about 94, I think. And you can tell that Toriyama's heart is a lot more into that, like the goofy gag humor stuff. I mean, the artwork is better than it is in the manga. There's just a lot more energy. And I think that the Boo arc, he was trying to keep himself invested. I think he was trying to keep himself interested. That's why there's a lot more humor. But like, I think the storytelling mechanics are a lot more unnatural. And I think that like there are some shark jump moments there, and I really like a lot of bits about it, like especially at the beginning. But by the end, it was sort of like it went on too long, and it's just not my favorite arc out of the entire canon of Dragon Ball.
You were so pissed. And so was I when the Earth blows up and he doesn't even save his own children. And it's like, and at the end of the day, him saving Mr. Satan and Dende was a blessing in disguise. But it's such a freaking like, dude, they built up Gotenks and Mystic Gohan or Ultimate Gohan for so many episodes to just throw them away. And it's funny because boy, oh boy, the Gohan fan base is so hurt with the way he's been treated. Not just there, but obviously in Resurrection F, he gets one-shotted by First Form Frieza, and then in Super, Beerus. I mean, we kind of expected that, but Vegeta does better than Gohan against Beerus. People are so mad, man. It's like, were you a big Gohan fan? Just out of curiosity.
I was. Can you show me?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. The little weird things coming up. I was. A lot of it came. My fandom from Gohan came from just reading about, like, I was familiar with little kid Gohan and very familiar with him in the Saiyan Saga when he was, trying to learn how to fight and being afraid and running away from Nappa and stuff. And you would see him have these anger moments and freak out. Because of the reruns, I was very familiar with that. And I would read about how he was the first person to go Super Saiyan 2 and the first person to, he beat Cell in the Cell games. He fought against Fourth Form Frieza. He becomes Mystic Gohan. And then I saw these images of him older and just him dressed as Goku in the Buu Saga. And I'm like, this is the coolest thing I have ever seen. And I read that, like, at least in the 90s, the series ends with him being the strongest character. I mean, barring Vegito, like Gohan is the strongest natural character. And the Dragon Ball, especially Dragon Ball Z, is different now than it was then. I mean, with the Battle of Gods, Dragon Ball Z Super, or Dragon Ball Super, and Resurrection F, it's just different. The storytelling is generally the same, but like it feels like the feel of it is different, just by the nature of the progression of time. And I feel
the
that
Goku and Vegeta show.
Yeah, I think that like when people remember Dragon Ball Z, they remember a lot of Goku, which is fine. But as Jesse and I were going to go over the series, I was realizing that the show is a lot more of an ensemble kind of show.
Yeah,
it's led a lot more by an ensemble cast than it was, and I think that like I feel that like the perception of Goku in people's memories has lent itself to having him overshadow everything else, to the point where I feel that like it completely it's the main drawback I do have to Resurrection F. Now we've not reviewed that yet, but I'll get into it when we get into it in a couple months. But I feel that like you really like seeing these characters, and there's a lot of these characters that you do enjoy, and I like Goku a lot. But I feel that once you make the series less about the world of Dragon Ball and more about Goku saving the day, and not the sole focus, the storytelling just kind of weakens. I think that's part of the Buark's problem, and part of why I feel half done whenever Gohan gets jobbed out, because I think that like if you look at the storytelling from the beginning to the end, Gohan's clearly supposed to be a lot more important than he's been recently. And I feel that like it is. I mean, people can say we're butthurt, but I think that like that's not for nothing,
No, I don't blame them. Yeah, I mean, he deserves more. I really think the storyline they're going to go with Super is that he's going to try and become this civilized husband and father. And Piccolo, like in episode 1, Piccolo was like spying on him. Piccolo's going to be the guy to tell him, dude, you have all this power. Please help us out. But he's like, nah, I got a wife and kids now. I don't know. I hope he gets at least 1 or 2 moments,
Yeah, I don't mind Gohan being a scholar and being a family guy and kind of settling down. I think that's fine.
Yeah.
I just don't like it when he's not portrayed to be a powerful fighter, because like I actually quite liked him a lot in Resurrection F, but he was kind of put in like the Dragon Ball Yamcha stage of like just kind of showcasing how strong the person is. Whereas
he even looks like Yamcha in Resurrection F.
Yeah, a little bit. But he can be a nice guy. He can be kind of a milksop in terms of like when you first see him. But I don't like pretending that he's not one of the most powerful fighters in the universe, because he absolutely is. And Goku and Vegeta might get stronger than him, but just don't make him look like he's not powerful. That's just my only thing.
So I'm pretty sure that at some point you and Jesse are going to cover Dragon Ball. I know you don't want to announce anything. I just have that feeling. I'm really curious about Jesse's opinion on the Red Ribbon Army arc, because there's a stretch of like 15 episodes where we only see Goku. Like I think it's like 15 episodes where there's none of the side characters there. It's just Goku and the Red Ribbon Army. I'm curious how he's going to take that. If it's going to be like, oh, it's just the Goku show, or if it's going to be, okay, well, it was a different story back then.
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, we've not said anything. We really have not. We've not discussed it, although we've not said no to it.
I just have a feeling eventually it'll happen.
Well, be that as it may, one thing I remember is I think I was listening to the KANZENSHUU podcast, and Mary on there saying that like she enjoys the character of Goku when he's a kid more, and he's a lot more of a protagonist because he can allow himself to be ignorant and silly.
Yes.
Because he's a kid. And I think that might lend itself to being the case with Jesse. I'm imagining. I mean, he could probably tell you better, but yeah, in the Red Ribbon arc, he's very much like he's meeting Snow. He's fighting General Blue. He's fighting Tao Pai Pai. So there's a lot of like singular adventures, which is fun because it's Dragon Ball. It's not developed into like Krillin and Yamcha being as important as they are later on, and you don't meet Tien yet. So like by the time of Dragon Ball Z, there are like a dozen Z fighters who can. Any one of them could probably destroy the planet if they wanted to.
Yes.
So, which is why I like the Cell Games is my favorite arc, because you see all them showcasing and being at the forefront. So I would imagine that Jesse would not mind it in Dragon Ball because that's where the context of the story is putting his shoulders on Goku. But yeah, in Dragon Ball Z, like later on in Dragon Ball Super, it's like only Goku can save us now. It's like, well, these guys can do something too. So
it's ridiculous. So what is your now we're gonna talk a little bit about comic books here because that's kind of your other forte. But what is your earliest Dragon Ball memory? Like when did you kind of like go way back? Like I know you said you were going looking up pictures and things like that like I did, but what is your earliest memory of Dragon Ball, and kind of take us through like how you really got into it to the point where you're doing a podcast about it now?
My earliest memory of Dragon Ball, and this is way before, this is at least a few years before the series came in my line of vision. I feel that I was at some sort of like store. I don't know if it was like a TJ Maxx or whatever, but I did see a copy of the Tree of Might. I remember that poster image of like, like space, and you see the tree from the planet, and you see Turles or Tullus and Goku's face. I just remember that image being very serious, and this is anime. But mainly on Toonami, because I am of that age, I was a big fan of Voltron. And
Me too.
I know Voltron was replaced by Robotech, which is one of my all-time favorites. But like I remember around that block, I think right after Voltron or during Voltron, or maybe even replacing Voltron, Dragon Ball Z premiered. And I remember catching I think it was the second episode that they produced. Not the produced, because the first episode is Gohan, being saved by Goku. But like, I think the second one that they actually showed on Toonami was the one where it starts off with Goku saying, "You have a tail," and he gives exposition about who Raditz gives exposition about who Goku really is, and it ends with Piccolo showing up. And I remember my brother watching this, and we have no idea what the show is about or whatever,
No.
but everything sounded so important. Like, I remember specifically when they're trying to figure out how to save Gohan from Raditz, and then Piccolo says, "You don't stand a chance," and they all look up and like, "Piccolo!" We were like, "Oh man, it's Piccolo! Who's Piccolo?" So
He looks cool.
yeah, there was just a lot of excitement. I think because Dragon Ball Z, watching that first and having a lot of this backstory just not explained, but there's a lot of like weight to the characters' interactions. I think just immediately sucks you in. At least it did for me. It makes you feel this is important. It makes you feel this is interesting. And as you watch the Raditz fight, Goku does the Kamehameha, and Piccolo powers up the Makan Kosapu, or the Special Beam Cannon. Like, It just looks, everything just looks so exciting. And then there's like, in 1 year's time you fight the Saiyans. And then as you learn more about it, people who are more familiar with it tell you, oh, they're going to fight the Saiyans, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. Like, it's just this, it was a modern kind of take on, like these kind of like, stories or legends or myths that your, older relatives might tell you when you're sitting on their knee. It's like a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, like there was just so much feeling of weight and importance and excitement with the story that was being told and what you would hear about it. I mean, the internet was still kind of young back then where you could read about it, but there would be misinformation. But the people who were familiar about it were like, this is going to happen. And even Toonami would show interstitials later on that hadn't happened yet, where you would see Gohan and Krillin on Namek, and Gohan is ready to fight, and he's about to fight, and he has a haircut, and it's just like, this is awesome. They somehow survived, but where's the other characters? And it's just like, it was just a very cool way to get young kids, at least in my generation, into something that they just did not know about. And this is why I kind of feel that like Dragon Ball is excellent, but Dragon Ball Z there is something to it where you can give it to a new audience and they can get into it, because that's just how
it's easier to digest for a Western audience. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, essentially, at least of a certain age group, I think so. Yeah.
Now, I was gonna ask you actually a question about Voltron. Have you seen Beast King Go Lion?
Is that the original Japanese version?
Yeah.
No, I really have only, when I watched Voltron, it was really only Toonami. I've not watched it much since.
Well, the reason why I'm bringing it up is because Voltron and Dragon Ball do have a couple things in common when it comes to this. And obviously, you'll know what I'm talking about. So when Dragon Ball first aired, obviously, we had the Ocean dub, very heavily edited. Right, blood, HFIL, all that stuff was gone.
Next Dimension.
Next Dimension, yeah, what your show's named after. But like, when you watch Go Lion, which is the Japanese Voltron, it is one of the goriest and bloodiest shows. And
awesome.
Dude, when I first looked up clips for this, I literally had the same feeling that I had when I first watched Japanese Dragon Ball Uncut. I was like, what is this? This is not what I remember. This is, like you have that feeling of they've been lying to us. This is even better. You know what I mean?
Well, that's something that kind of led me to reading the manga, because I think a friend of ours had a chapter or two. Viz would produce these kind of double chapter issues, and I remember reading the scene where Yamcha died, which is taken on life upon itself. But like, I remember reading that in the manga format, and Krillin's like, he's dead. I was really disturbed. And like, there's blood on his body, and
you see his corpse there.
Yeah, you see his corpse, and Tien would get really messed up, and like even Chaozu was bleeding when he was like hit by the rocks, and it was like when you read the manga, it was so brutal. And in the edited anime, just they just look dusty or whatever. So the culture shock really lent itself to like seeing an edited version, seeing like the Japanese version, it's like, this is really dark, and I don't know if I can take this, but I'm gonna try. And
yeah, when you're a kid, you're like, blood, awesome. It's weird, but screw it, I want to see it.
I'll never forget when I first saw it, when Funimation, like in 2000, came out with the new episodes of the Ginyu Force story, and you first see Gohan, and he has that kind of wide-eyed, dead look on his face, and like in the younger version, he's so bloody that I was like, whoa, is that what Raccoon did to him? Good God.
He broke his neck. I mean, in the Japanese version and the redub in Kai, you hear the crack.
Yeah.
Just
and it's interesting. It's interesting. It's also, I'm not sure. The way the anime is now, I'm not sure if they can get away with that violence even in Japan these days. At least not with Dragon Ball Z.
Nah, it's toned down. Yeah, because Kai was very heavily edited. Same thing. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, same thing with Go Lion, man. I check definitely if you ever get a chance, YouTube some Go Lion clips. You'll be like, wait a minute, this is not what I remember. This is very violent. I wanted to ask you. So since I'm pretty sure that you obviously grew up playing video games, probably similar to myself. When you first saw Dragon Ball, and when you first saw in the intro Goku's hair going gold, and when you first saw the Kamehameha, was it that eerily familiar feeling of, I've seen this before in Street Fighter, it's called the Hadouken, and I've seen Sonic do this? Did that ever go through your head like, dude, what is happening here?
I feel that I was aware of Super Sonic a little after I got into DBZ, so I think it was a little bit of a reverse then. Because I tend to play games like classic games a lot later than they're in their heyday. Like I played Sonic like in the late 90s, early 2000s, rather than when it came out. But I was definitely into Street Fighter before Dragon Ball Z, and I think it's because when I first saw the Kamehameha, it was kind of like a beam that kind of followed Raditz, rather than like a fireball that Ryu and Ken and Sakura and Akuma and Dan and all those characters.
Well, Dan has the one-handed one.
He does, the Gadoken, I think it is. But like so there was the hand movements. The pose was obviously the same. I think I had just imagined it was some sort of Japanese thing. And is there actually an official explanation to the similarities between the two movements?
I just always saw it in my head, man. I don't know if there's anything like I don't know if they copied Toriyama, but I mean, hell, everybody's copied Toriyama at one point or another, it seems.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you want to technical, like the lower body positioning of the Hadouken is different than the lower body position of the Kamehameha. But even still, like that kind of like blue light fireball is very. I have to imagine that Street Fighter is somewhat influenced by it, because by that time, Dragon Ball was an institution in Japan. So,
Super Sonic one is obvious though.
Well, that is a blatant homage. I mean, like when you first get all the rings and the emeralds and like the pose and like the fact that it waves and his eye color changes. That's, you can't deny that.
Eggman is in a ship that looks a lot like Frieza's.
Yeah, it does. That I wasn't aware of, but yeah.
Dude, they gypped everything. In fact, if you play Sonic Adventure, I think 1, the villain in that game is trying to become perfect. That sounds familiar.
You don't say.
It's blatant, man. So all right, when it comes to like, okay, let me ask you about comics then. So did you get into comics prior to Dragon Ball? I'm assuming yes, but maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah. I've been in comics all my life. I can't tell you exactly the moment I started. I was just like, I liked Batman on the animated series. I liked
everybody liked that.
My dad got me a Batman comic, and it's just been since I can read. I've been reading comics.
So, would you consider yourself now? Would you consider yourself more of a comic book guy likes Dragon Ball, or a Dragon Ball guy likes comics?
I've always been a comic guy that likes Dragon Ball, but I've never felt the need to tear down one segment of geekery over another. Like, I do get the sense that, like, in my comic podcasting circle, there is a bit of, like, eyebrow arching whenever I said, yeah, I want to record this Dragon Ball Z show. And people are like, okay, Dragon Ball Z, huh? Whatever. And now it's time for me to do my Aquaman and Firestorm podcast.
But Dragon Ball is a comic, too.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like, which is why I liked talking about the differences in the manga and the anime, because it was like, I always appreciate that there was a comic book source material. That was always cool to me as a comic fan. So I always made sure. I mean, it would be incorrect to just call it the comic book, but at the same time, that's essentially what it is. So I thought that, like, it was always fun to see the differences between Goldo's death in the original manga comic and then his death in the anime, and seeing the differences. And quite honestly, Toriyama's art is a lot more special, I think, in the manga than the translated version with its different production studios in the anime.
Especially for Dragon Ball Super. Yeah, people are mad about it. People are losing their minds over Dragon Ball Super's animation. And you know what sucks? We don't have any source material because the manga is Toyotaro's, the anime is Toei, and Toriyama sent the manuscripts. So there is no source material unless we get our hands on these manuscripts, and we're not ever going to get our hands on them. So people out there who are fighting over canon, it's not possible anymore. Just don't fight over it. So now with the anime and the manga kind of both taking ideas from Toriyama's like manuscript, there's like no sense in arguing about canon, but the community is so... A lot of people in the community are so obsessed with canon, and it's like... And you can vouch for this. Even Marvel and DC have had struggles with canon for 50 years. So just don't think about it anymore, guys. Just turn your brain off.
Well, in fairness, I care less than I used to, but I do think that there is, because Dragon Ball Z is a more or less linear story with less alternative interpretations. Like, there's not like, there's Jocko the Galactic Patrolman, and to some beyond extent, the Dr. Slump, although I don't necessarily consider those the same story.
No, not at all, yeah.
With Dragon Ball, it's like a set of characters and a set of timelines in their lives. I can understand how whenever there's something that retcons something that's come before, what you know is different and what you should go by is different. I think that's fair to say, why does this need to be? Now, I think that I don't know exactly why they had to retell a story in Super that they've told in the movies before, but I'm not, because it is recent enough, that's fine with me. If they started saying, let's just do the series again, but it's all the same series, it ends up being kind of, a Star Trek movie series kind of territory where it's like, which one is which. Yes. Now, I don't think it's gotten egregious yet, so I'm not all that worried about it. But I think that the loose grip on continuity, while it isn't a problem yet, that does warrant keeping an eye on, I think.
It's just getting worse and worse every week for me as far as Super goes, because the timeline in Super's a mess. We don't know when it takes place. And now, technically, if you want to break it down, there's 3 canons. If you want to go that way, or actually maybe even 4. You've got the Battle of Gods film, you've got the Battle of Gods story arc in Super, and then you've got the Toyotaro manga adaptation. And they're all portraying the same story differently. So it's confusing to a lot of people. And I just always say, just don't worry too much about it, because they don't care. I don't think Toei gives a crap.
No, they don't, and neither does Toriyama, quite frankly. But you gotta. I think as a comic fan, you kind of gotta relate to every time a character's origin is redone. Like you have the original Detective Comics 30 or 31 origin of Batman, the Golden Age. Then you have in the
when he had a gun, right?
More or less, yeah. You have that. Then you have the Silver Age where his mom wasn't shot but had a heart attack. And then you have in the Bronze Age where she was shot again. And then you have in the 90s. And then you have Batman the 89 with the Joker. Then you have in 2006 when the killer was caught. And then you have the New 52 version. They're all telling the same story, but they're embellishing it differently. And your take is whichever one that you like the most, essentially.
That's what I've been saying for years. Everybody's canon is their own canon. You can hate on GT and you love Broly. It doesn't make sense, but great. Hey, all right. I was going to ask you, what do you think, in your opinion, why is there such a crossover appeal between comic books and Dragon Ball, the anime, basically anime and comic books in general? Is it just kind of that, I guess, young male entertainment type thing? What kind of bridges the gap, in your opinion?
I think the storytelling is just more interesting than basic fable. Again, kind of fables of old. This is just basically the reinterpretation of that. I feel as though that. There are in some instances there are people who like comics and who like anime that don't like the other thing, which I think is kind of ridiculous.
Yes.
I've always found anime to be very interesting. It's always just felt more important. It felt like the storytelling has always been stronger, and yeah, that sometimes the sense of humor doesn't necessarily land with me, but sometimes it does. And I think it depends on the person, because as people get older, they find that they gravitate towards one thing or the other, or they find that they like both aspects of both genres in storytelling and in media, and they're fine with that. I think it depends on the person's I don't want to say maturity, but sense of what they like and prioritizing that over another. I'm just by nature more into comics than anime. But I've seen a lot of anime. I own anime and manga, and I really do like that storytelling art form because it's very unique to me as a Westerner, and there's just storytelling elements in that you don't find in Western mainstream big two superhero or otherwise American storytelling. I think that like if you like storytelling generally, then you can glob onto either or both.
Yeah, I agree. Now, what do you think was the bigger disaster, Dragon Ball Evolution or Fantastic Four?
I was surprised how little I was annoyed by Evolution. Probably because it had come and gone and it died a quick soft death, so it didn't hurt me. Whereas Fantastic Four felt like it went out of its way to annoy me, and I'm not even that big of an F4 fan. But Evolution, I remember talking about that with Jesse and Daniel Yarbrough, who's a frequent emailer on our show.
Oh yeah, I was gonna shout Daniel out here at the end, but you did it first.
And I was saying like what the fuck, but at the same time it was just like whatever. What are you gonna do? Because like we got Battle of Gods and Resurrection F, which went on to have much more success in America. So it's like it was kind of like this was harmless, and I do feel bad for the actors, but I suppose some of them went on to better roles. So it was an interesting thing to laugh at.
It was just, I remember Comics Explained's review on it. He just sat in front of the mic and was like, and he goes, this is what he said. I don't know if you agree with this. He goes, I feel like this movie was made on a bet. Like somebody dared somebody to do it.
Well, I think that the blame goes to Fox and the lax production, the budget slashing, the changing of directors, because the actors sounded at least James Marsters sounded he was game, and I think if it was obviously done for money, but like if there was a better idea on how to make this work, it could have been at least decent. But laziness will always get you nowhere. So I think that's the main. Laziness in the production is the real source of evil, and that led to the wacky script. But it was, I mean, if you're aware of Dragon Ball, it was surprisingly more aware of that than I was expecting it to be. Now, of course, that doesn't save it, but it could have been worse. But that's not saying that it's not
an abortion.
Yeah,
right. So, all right, I'm gonna put you on the spot. And I don't know if you're going to answer this question or not, but I'm putting you on the spot right now. Mm-hmm. Falconer or Kikuchi?
Oh, all right, let's do this.
Oh boy.
Oh man, it's actually funny because I was actually I've been talking to a fellow podcaster, and he's telling me that he has an idea for an episode on Batman's music, and I thought that'd be a great episode for the next dimension. So I've actually been looking over a lot of the music myself. I came up on. Well, is that necessary?
Yeah, you had a mixed bag of right? I noticed that. I came up with Kikuchi. Well, I came up on Shuki Levy first, but once I heard Kikuchi, I fell in love with it because I'm a big fan of like orchestral scores, like Star Wars, John Williams style stuff, Hans Zimmerman. So I love that, or Hans Zimmer. But Falconer's got this crazy following.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. First of all, I do not appreciate the sub and dub fans just biting at each other. I really
agreed.
I'm not saying that you are, but
no, I agree with you.
But I feel that Bruce Falconer's music is really good. I think I compared to Shuki Levy's Power Rangers-esque tones. I mean, I think that it set the mood strongly when they came out with new episodes. I love the Ginyu Force theme. Just generally speaking, whenever there was the moments where the characters would be talking and nothing would be happening for the majority of the episode, there was still that kind of dun dun. And yet, it's shit was going to go down at any second. So there are some themes I think are great later on, and I think he's very, very good. With Kikuchi, I've always liked his music. I do feel that and this is not necessarily a negative, but I feel that it never felt. It always felt a couple of decades behind. It felt like more at home with a Drunken Master, Jackie Chan early era kind of movie than an 80s or 90s anime, and that's obviously comparing towards Yu Yu Hakusho or Cutie Honey or the classics back then. Whereas the music,
about Cutie Honey, that's interesting. I don't know. You're the first person I've ever talked to who knows about that.
I'm aware of some of the old stuff. I'm not seeing too much of it, but I'm aware of it. But 90s anime, like Yu Yu Hakusho, Rurouni Kenshin, Outlaw Star to some extent, even Gundam. The music is a lot more. I won't say grounded, but it's just modern. Yeah. And Kikuchi's score, the series in '95, the Kikuchi score, it just does not feel modern to me. But that being said, as music itself, it's very cool. I love the Japanese version of when Majin and Vegeta, kills the stadium attendants, and everyone's kind of yes, like it starts up when you see Gohan, and like he does that shit-eating grin. That music is awesome, and the music generally is awesome. But it's very different. They're pretty much apples and oranges, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, and the thing I've always seen it as is I have been more towards Kikuchi, but I do respect some of Falconer's themes for sure. Just me personally. The thing is, you're spot on about how it sounds old. I think it's supposed to sound that way because I've always seen Dragon Ball, especially Z, as like a Western, and I think you may have said that on one of your shows. I know I picked it up somewhere because I was like, oh, that makes sense.
I've described the music, the Kikuchi's music, as a Chinese Western from 20 years or 70s era.
Yeah, but I think that was the point because, if you do your research on Toriyama, you know that Toriyama was heavily influenced by Drunken Master. That's one of his favorite movies.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So I almost feel like that was done on purpose. Like they wanted it to sound old. Because like you said, there were other anime at the time didn't sound like that.
Whether they intended for it to sound kind of ancient or not, I think that like they stuck with it for the majority of, for the entire original series. I'm not a fan of I forgot his name, I knew the composer's name, but like the Dragon Ball Kai score.
Sumitomo, the guy who's doing Super now. He's like nothing.
Did he do the Kai theme or the soundtrack originally? I thought it was Yamamoto.
Yamamoto. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you meant the Buu Saga. Yeah, Yamamoto did the Kai first, then he got booted because of the plagiarism scandal, and then Sumitomo took over for the Buu Saga for Battle of Gods, Resurrection F Super.
Now, I've not heard that music, to be fair. I can't lend an opinion to that, but I remember watching Kai. I watched Kai for the first time along with Jesse, so I could have a point of reference. But I also read the manga and was aware of watched the original anime when we were doing our podcast. And I never liked that score. It was just never really. No, I liked some of the opening and ending themes. I did like the second ending theme well enough, but the background music was just felt very, very kind of complacent and kind of plastic-ish compared to like the breadth of varying scores that the original Kikuchi score had, especially in the Buu arc.
Yeah, I agree that Kikuchi, it's going to be a debate forever. The thing is that, a lot of fans have said, if it wasn't for Falconer, Dragon Ball wouldn't be successful. And that's a liar, pants on fire situation, because if you do the research, when Dragon Ball first aired on Toonami, it was Levy's score and it was still blowing up the ratings. So it doesn't matter who scored it. Dragon Ball is going to be a success no matter what. Right? Now, I wanted to ask you about your podcast before we get out of here. You have chosen to... The way you formatted it is, so everybody listening, of course, check it out, dbznextdimension.libsyn.com. I will put a link down below from episode 1 to episode 44, 45, wherever it's at by the time you hear this. You have done basically, the way you formatted it is you're doing, the arc, and then you'll do the movies that correspond or that were released when that arc was around, roughly, and then you'll do another arc, like, you'll do the Frieza saga, then do movies like 3 and 4 and 5 or whatever, and then you'll do like the Cell arc, and then you'll do movies, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever. Mm-hmm. But you've chosen to do the filler arcs, Garlic and the Otherworld Tournament, last. And I was just wondering why you chose. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just curious to why you did it that way.
I felt that like those weren't relevant to cover chronologically because of Kai, because of the manga, those were kind of made irrelevant to the general conversation of Dragon Ball Z. I mean, when people think about Dragon Ball Z, they don't think Garlic Jr. arc and Otherworld Tournament first,
Agreed there.
And that's not necessarily like damning the quality. It's just that, as far as like the modern era was concerned, I felt that like I wanted to cover those because those were part of the original anime that I had watched those. I felt that, I felt it would feel incomplete to completely ignore them. But I feel that like I thought it would have been fun to like see the series and then go back and see, well, this is what they did in between the original storylines. And I thought it'd be kind of nice to see them, retrospectively, almost. And I thought it was fun. It was almost a kind of a shock going from like the Buu arc and Battle of Gods to the Garlic Jr. storyline, where like
with no Goku,
Krillin's bald again, Gohan's a kid again. Like that was, it didn't impress upon me until I started watching and just how long it had been in the series since we've seen that iteration of the characters. It really was, because we have not seen the Kai version of Majin Buu. We watched the original anime, and that's nearly 100 episodes long. It took us a solid over a year to cover the entire Buu arc, so it's been forever since we've seen Kid Gohan. So like, it was fun, and it was. I think that like, again, paying lip service to my childhood memory. Even the Garlic Jr. arc itself. That was sort of like a mini series that they did on the Rising Sun block in Saturday mornings. That wasn't during the weekday. So, and the Otherworld tournament was only 5 episodes. But I felt that it was cool to treat those things as their own little things and not part of the saga, because I felt that fans were aware of their relative little importance, and it would be nice to talk about arcs in one episode as opposed to dozens. So I just thought it would be an interesting change.
And I did find it very curious that, and this is something that it's been years, but Funimation, for some reason, they attached the Otherworld tournament to the Great Saiyaman arc. So those old tapes were Great Saiyaman tapes, and it was Otherworld tournament, and that's actually not the case. Otherworld tournament's actually the tail end of the Cell arc, and then 200. I don't know. People are confused about that. They think that that's part of the Saiyaman arc, and it's not. Now, what I wanted to ask you is, are you going to at some point, and I hope you say yes, because Jesse watched the Kai version of the old episodes, are you going to show him some of the Gohan filler? Because I don't know about you, but to me, the filler in the Vegeta saga, the Gohan robot episode, the Gohan dinosaur episode, the orphans, when the Z Fighters go back in time, all that stuff, yeah. I love that stuff. I love it. That's like for me, that's good filler.
Yeah, to be honest, I'll agree with that. To be honest, I was actually kind of sorry that like in the format that we decided on, we did lose that, and
that might be a fun bonus episode. I'm just saying, maybe it's up to you.
Maybe. I mean, like in episode 2, where we talked about like the year between Raditz and the Saiyans, I ended up having kind of quickly recapping those filler stories, and I felt it was a shame because I think you get a lot of development out of Gohan, who's a new character. And you learn, you familiarize yourselves with the Z Fighters more, because it's mainly just you see them twice training on Kami's tower, and then you see them go off to die. And I don't know if if you're watching Z for the first time, get to sense of those characters through that version more so than you do in the original anime. So it's an idea. I mean, Jesse is getting ready to be married at the time of this recording, so he's kind of strapped for time. So it's an idea that I might throw at him, but only when we have the time to do so. Now, we plan to actually finish up the show at the end of the year, covering Resurrection F, and then we'll, stop for a bit, and then we might come back to cover Dragon Ball Super, depending on how that turns out. But I would actually personally like to get to episode 50, so we might throw in some bonus episodes that are outside of the talked about schedule. So it's an idea to have. I appreciate that.
No, definitely. And that's what I was going to ask you next. We're going to wrap it up here. DBZ Next Dimension.libsyn.com. What's in store for the future? You said you're going to take a break after Resurrection F. I was just wondering, are you any talk about GT? You don't know yet? Just take a break and see what happens?
I've pretty much written off GT because I'm not seeing all of GT, so I can't speak to with the level of authority that Dragon Ball Z has. And because of my massive ego, I just can't allow that.
Plus, the same way.
I don't like it that much. So I'm not. If there's going to be a Dragon Ball GT podcast, it most likely won't be from me. We are doing. As of this recording, we're talking about today when we're going to record the Otherworld tournament. There probably will be some other bonus episodes, I think, because throughout our time on the podcast, we've done episodes that are not covering the main storylines. We've done some April Fool's episodes. We've done
Sailor Moon episode.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites of all time.
I enjoyed that Moon Prism podcast. I enjoyed it.
That was a lot of fun. And also, I mean, if anybody just doesn't feel like hearing us talk about the Frieza saga, shit, that was my fault. Talking about the Frieza saga as though it were new. Episode 43 was our massive 5-hour podcast where we just retrospectively talked about the entire thing, all of Dragon Ball Z. So that's actually been a pretty popular episode despite its massive length, but no pun intended. But I'm thinking Otherworld tournament for sure. We're going to plan to eradicate the Super Saiyans because I've never seen that before, but I've always known about it, especially the original Playdia version in Japan.
It's not very good. I'm just being honest.
Well, that would actually probably lend itself to an even funnier episode. But Jesse and I are going to both see that for the first time, and then we're going to cover Resurrection F as a final episode. But I'm thinking we're probably going to do a bonus episode or two, probably talking about some of the video games. I've actually I own the 3 PlayStation Japanese video games.
Legends, Ultimate Battle 22, and Final Bout.
That's correct, sir. Absolutely.
Of course. I had them. I had it. Did you have, let me ask you, bro. Here we go. Did you have a Game Shark and did you have a little spring and did you play them back then? Like,
yes.
Oh, man. So you and I are like brothers from a different mother, bro. These kids don't get it, bro. They don't get it. They don't get it. You had to, look, you had to get a Game Shark, put a spring in the back of the damn PS1, put a regular game in, turn it on, take the game out, put the Japanese game in, hit the button, and then figure out what the hell to do.
Yeah, it kind of primed the PlayStation to play this other language game. And like as you were describing it, I'm like, why all the trouble?
Dude, let me ask you a question. Did you ever have any heating issues with it? Because we had to.
Yes. Yeah,
did you do the thing where you turned it sideways?
No. When we were playing Ultimate Battle 22, my brother and I, like our PlayStation was on a carpet, and we didn't realize that would overheat the PlayStation, so we had to trade in for another PlayStation and just put it on a chair now. And I think that like the PS2 and 3 don't have those problems anymore. But that is exactly what happened, and
it was a fan on it.
Yeah. No, it was crazy, and I love the fact that I don't know, if I'm being completely honest, I don't know how if those games are actually all that good, but I can't not love them. In fact, I was talking to a friend of mine who was playing the DBZ games. And he was playing Ultimate Battle 22, which is the first one that we played, and he hates it. And I was like, everything you're saying to me is not untrue, but like that was a game that my brother and I saved up money to buy at a bootleg gaming store, in the ghetto. So like we cannot we can't not love that, especially with the opening sequence of all the characters doing their moves. So like,
the soundtrack is amazing.
Oh yeah, I've used a few themes from that game soundtrack, and so I think that like I have it in my head. I probably shouldn't announce this before I record it, but like I would really like to talk about those games before we finish up with Resurrection F.
That would be a great retrospective, man. Because I have very fond memories of Legends. Because remember, the trick with Legends is when you play the story mode, you have to do the story mode exactly right, which means you have to have Vegeta lose to Frieza. You go in there, you let him beat you up. People don't remember that.
And I think that like you gotta have Krillin be killed so you can become Super Saiyan, right?
Yeah. Or you can beat him the other way, but you won't unlock everything. And remember, it's in Japanese, so it doesn't. The game doesn't tell you this. You had to like look it up online or whatever, But that's exciting.
There was a website that talked about all, because this is before like the revolution of Dragon Ball Z games.
Was it the yellow website that had them all listed in squares?
Yes.
What the hell was the name of that website, bro?
Oh God. I don't remember. I just like it just showed an image of Super Saiyan 2 Gohan and just had all like from the original Famicom with like Dragon Boy and Dragon Power, Dragon Ball, all the way to the most recent, which I guess it would be the PlayStation ones.
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was Final Bout. I think you're right. Yeah.
They would show you Super Budokan 1, 2, 3. They would show you the Planet Eradicate the Super Saiyans, which I thought was just the coolest looking thing. I'm really looking forward to seeing that. And it's like
when you're a kid, you see Sega CD, and you're like, dude, I have to have one. It's so real. And then when you get one, you're like, man, this game sucks. This game sucks. This game sucks. Give me my Sega Genesis back.
Oh yes.
Right. No, dude, that website. I've been looking for the name of that website for freaking months, and I don't remember it.
I feel that like I saw it like a few years ago. I feel like I saw it like by the time we started the podcast, but it's been so long. And of course, you probably find information on all the games elsewhere. But that was a great site for and I think I saw that as Dragon Ball Z was ending in America. So
yeah,
it was awesome.
I remember all that stuff, man. All right, well, thank you, Donovan, for coming on. It was a great time. Thank you. DBZNextDimension.libsyn.com. Are there any other projects you want to plug, like the comic review show that you do?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Danny, for having me. This was very, very fun, and I very much appreciate all the kind things you said about our shows. Those are always well appreciated, absolutely.
Definitely. And I would like to get you back on a future video, maybe doing some discussions if you have some time.
Sure. I'm totally open for that.
Great.
Yeah, first, as has been said before, you can find The Next Dimension, a Dragon Ball Z podcast hosted by myself and Jesse Garrett, on the website dbznextdimension.libsyn.com. You can also, we're on iTunes. That's probably easier to find this on, or any sort of like podcatcher. We also have a Facebook page. And I also produce a show that I do with my friends, the Comic Book Film Review spelled REVUE. We talk about just a comic book film once a month. Most recent episode is this year's critical hit, Fantastic Four. Critical hit in the video game sense. You can find us at CBF Review spelled REVUE, .libsyn.com. We also have a Facebook page and are on iTunes. I write reviews. I review the Batgirl ongoing series on the BatmanUniverse.net. I've actually done a lot of work for that website. I go to San Diego Comic-Con every year to report for them.
That's right, the Batman universe, yes.
I was on the Comic Cast for 3 years until I couldn't take it anymore. But I've done a lot of content on that website. You can find me there. And I also recently have written essays for the Hooded Utilitarian comic blog at thehoodedUtilitarian.com. But Next Dimension and Comic Book Film Review are the two main podcasts I do. And once again, thank you very much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it, Danny. And again, thank you very much for the very loving words you threw at the podcast. That means a lot.
And thank you for entertaining me during those long hours at my IT job that I had when I wasn't doing anything. It was just hours of nothing, waiting for bad stuff to happen and have to fix it.
Have you ever written to the show? Have you sent us an email?
I've never emailed you, but I've commented on your I was going to a couple times. I've commented on your Facebook page. I think I might have been the guy who told you about Super. I think I may have been the guy who put in the thing, check this out. Or I know I broke the news to you guys about either Super or Resurrection F with a bunch of exclamation points, but that was months ago.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Well, no, yeah. Again, thank you very much. And this was a lot of fun. I appreciated it.
Yeah. Shout out to Yarborough. Shout out to Alex Evangeli. That's your other biggest fan.
Saskia. She's a lot of fun.
Yeah. No, and the thing is with me is that you gotta understand. And same thing with my videos. There's people that listen to us, both you and I, who never ever write in. Like I've never written into you, but I listen. So there's that silent majority that's always out there.
There's no such thing as a good silent majority. So make yourself known.
Yeah, make yourself known. Well, now you know. So there you go. All right. Well, thanks everybody, and hey, thank you, Donovan. I'll catch y'all down the road.